Dave from New Jersey. It's the SNL Nerd, the show where two comics from New Jersey nerd out about Saturday Night Live. I'm your co-host, John Trumbull.
And I'm your co-host, Darren Patterson.
Darren, I nearly called myself your name. I don't know why I did that.
Wow. Dude, wow. This lockdown has really affected your brain.
It really has. It really has. We are here. We're doing a special bonus episode because we've got a very special guest. We've got an SNL writer on the show, a bona fide SNL writer. We've got Mr. Hugh Fink on the show.
Is it now the point where I can say hello?
Yes. Please say hello, Hugh Fink. Hugh Fink.
Hello, John. Hello, Darren. This is quite an honor.
Oh, well, we are honored to have you, sir. Now, just to give people like a primer on you, you wrote for SNL for 7 seasons, from season 20 in 1995 to season 21 in 1995 to season 27 in 2002. And you've go ahead.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And you've appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman, Late Night with Conan O'Brien. You've had a half-hour special on Comedy Central. You created the Showbiz Show with David Spade. You wrote for The Drew Carey Show. You wrote for Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. You've written for The Muppets.
Wow.
All true. And, of course, the hardest people to work with of all those people you just said was the Muppets.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got one up on Michael O'Donoghue because you do write for Felt.
God, that's so O'Donoghue would have had a heart attack if he had to deal with the Muppets like I did.
Are there big divas in the Muppets?
There are. And I'm not kidding you guys. There was this thing where I wrote the script, I co-wrote the script with these two young writers who I recruited, who were Muppets fans. And the script was approved by Disney, because, Disney owns the Muppets. So they were the executive producers. So we're at the table read in New York before we start shooting this movie. And the guy who plays Kermit found me and said, "Hey, I have to tell you, Kermit would never say this."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty diva-ish.
Was this the guy that was like feuding with the Henson family?
Yes, that is the guy.
That's the Kermit they fired.
That's the Kermit they fired.
Yeah.
It's funny you know about that. Because he actually was a nice fellow once we got past that issue, but a little weird that he talked about Kermit in the third person, and to try to use that BS of saying Kermit wouldn't say that, of course, made me, this felt like an episode of The Twilight Zone.
Wow.
For me to go, you mean you wouldn't say it because you are Kermit. You're a human being who's an actor. Kermit is a friggin' puppet that's stuffed with foam. You do realize that, sir.
The sock at the end of my arm has some issues with the script.
Exactly.
Wow.
That is funny.
Yeah.
But
they were I'd say all the guys who, I say guys because they literally were all men. There were no women. They're all kind of quirky and possessive and territorial about their precious Muppet voices. And they all wanted to, in a sense, chime in creatively. But that's the equivalent of, if you're making a feature film with live actors, what necessarily qualifies actors to be rewriting a script? Right?
Yeah.
Some of them have no ability to write.
Right,
So
right.
it was challenging.
Interesting. Wow, that's fantastic. All right, so when Trumbull mentioned that you were going to be on our podcast, I actually got really excited because, as we know, we are SNL nerds, but we're also stand-up comedy nerds. Like, we're big, huge fans of stand-up comedy. And I remember seeing you way back in the day when I used to watch things like the A-List on Comedy Central and VH1 Stand-Up Spotlight, and seeing your stand-up, and of course you were on Letterman and everything. And I was been a huge fan of your work from back in the day.
I appreciate that, Darren. Since you did mention VH1 Spotlight, I'll always remember that the night I did my taping here in Los Angeles was the night of the O.J. Simpson's Bronco chase.
Wow.
World. So I was sitting in the green room before my set, watching the live coverage of OJ's Bronco going down the 405.
Wow.
Holy cow.
The audience at the taping wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
They were just, in the crowd waiting for a good comedy show. But those of us who were off stage were freaking out.
Oh, wow.
I remember I did like a Sunday night set at one of the local places we've done stand up here in New Jersey at Tierney's, and then when I got off stage, this was a few years ago, it was the night that they got Bin Laden. So I was like, well, okay, that's memorable.
Okay, how can I work this into the act?
The Navy SEALs, after they got him, they turned apparently to their commander and said, by the way, if there's time, you can catch John Trumbull doing his set.
Exactly. They were like, yeah, we can fly back in time.
Yeah,
right.
Very happy for you.
We're going to go to Montclair in New Jersey and catch this. Yeah.
And then hit Ray's afterwards for dinner.
I used to have a line in my act about like that I performed on the night they got Bin Laden, and I think I also performed by coincidence the night that Saddam Hussein died or something like that. So I was doing a thing about like my comedy was killing evildoers.
Nice.
So
that's a superpower.
Exactly. If only I could just harness this power in a more productive way. So, Hugh, how did you start out as a stand-up? Did you start out as a writer? How did you get into comedy?
I started off as a stand-up.
Okay.
Yes, I was at NYU, and the comedy scene in New York City was starting to blossom.
Mm-hmm.
I loved going to comedy clubs, and sort of got inspired by watching comedians on TV, but also friends at NYU saying, you should do this, you could do it. So I wrote original material and in a limited way went up in some legit clubs while I was in college. And then I moved to Los Angeles to pursue it professionally.
Okay. So you started young. You were like still in college.
I started really young. I did.
All right.
Right out of college.
Wow, that's great. I wish I had started younger. I didn't start comedy until like my 30s, which I've heard other comics say like, oh yeah, that's too late. But yeah.
There's exceptions.
Uh-huh.
Rodney Dangerfield was an aluminum siding salesman into his 40s while he was dabbling in stand-up. But he started really late. So I think that, hey, if you have a passion for it and you're getting laughs, then it's never too late.
Yeah. Like I know, like also Louis Black started pretty late, and people say that about Phyllis Diller as well. So it's
yes,
you start when you start.
That's true.
Yeah. And I remember, like you also wrote for Last Comic Standing. I remember in one of the early seasons there was like a grandmother who came on who was just starting stand up, and she had to be in her 70s at least.
That rings a bell.
I don't remember her name, but yeah.
Yeah, the best thing on the season I did Last Comic Standing was the year that J.B. Smoove hosted.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And there was when they eliminated it down to like the final 8 comics, we did a roast of Gilbert Gottfried, where the 8 remaining young comedians had to write roast jokes about Gilbert. Well, I got as part of my job to write all of Gilbert's jokes about the young comics.
Oh, nice.
It was so fun because I just got to be so vicious and no holds barred. And of course, Gilbert is great. He was willing to do anything.
Yeah.
So a lot of the jokes got cut from the version that aired on NBC because they were just too mean. Mm-hmm. And actually, I wrote a lot of jokes at NBC's expense, just trashing the network, and all those jokes got cut out.
Wow.
Ooh. Yeah, Last Comic Standing, I feel like it would have been, I don't know, I don't want to say a better show, but maybe a more effective show if it was on like cable where it could be more no holds barred,
I'd agree. And if you think about it, whereas other big competition shows such as American Idol or The Voice have legitimately launched some pretty big careers, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, Last Comic Standing, it really didn't launch careers in a major way.
Right.
Yes, it got some comedians paid a little more on the road, from their normal fee.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of taking someone who's an unknown and making them a household name, or even making them a major comedy star, it just never happened.
Yeah, that's true. You don't really hear about Dat Fan anymore.
Oh,
Yeah.
you said it right before I did, so you.
I mean, I remember when that show started, all the Dat Fan T-shirts and record albums. I mean, it was just you couldn't turn around and not see Dat Fan somewhere.
Yeah,
Right.
Dat Fan mania didn't really last as long as Justin Bieber mania, I gotta say.
No. It probably because he didn't have as good of a hairstyle.
It may have been that.
He didn't have that swoopy thing with his hair.
Yes. That Renaissance didn't last very long, unfortunately. Actually, Hugh, I have a question. So you said you started in New York and then you moved that to LA. And I was wondering what was the decision to do that? Because I mean, New York is a pretty huge stand-up, has a huge stand-up scene here. So like, I was wondering what the thinking was to go to the West Coast, and like how were the scenes different? Maybe if you saw that.
Right. So the real reason was for television, because you're right, New York had a lot of talented comedians and a lot of clubs, but at that time, very few TV shows, television production was being done in New York. So if you wanted a career doing more than just working comedy clubs, you kind of needed to be seen in Los Angeles. That's what everyone said.
Got it.
It was accurate at the time. So I decided, well, I don't want to work here in New York and get really good, but be sort of under the radar. I'd rather get noticed and be in thick competition quickly. So that's what led to my decision.
Okay. And that obviously worked out for you, I would say.
It did, honestly. And looking back on it, it was a pretty ballsy move, because I was a young, inexperienced comic, and you can't be that good when you're that young.
Mm-hmm.
But I had something. I had my writing ability. I was a natural performer. So I very quickly was mixing it up with really talented people, everyone from Dennis Miller and Andrew Dice Clay and Bob Saget. Like, I met them early in my career, and they were already on the road to greatness. But if I'd stayed in New York, I obviously wouldn't have had those connections.
Right. So how did your path lead you to SNL? You were friends with David Spade, isn't that right?
That's right. So
okay.
Spade and I met at the Improv in LA and immediately hit it off.
Mm-hmm.
We just shared a sensibility. So we became friends, and I'd say fairly quickly he got SNL and would reach out to me just for help, writing Hollywood Minute jokes and punching up sketches and stuff like that. So I really give him credit for introducing me to the powers that be at Saturday Night Live.
Okay, so were you coming into the offices to do that, or were you just doing that on the side?
It was on the side. So
okay.
He's in New York, I'm in Los Angeles, faxing him jokes,
right.
Talking to him on the phone a lot. Yeah. But I'd never set foot at SNL until I did visit the city when I think I was doing stand-up, and he was already there with Rob Schneider and Sandler, who I both knew. And he invited me to hang out one late night at the show, which was a blast. So they let me sit in the writer's room, and you guys will relate to this. Jim Downey, who I heard a lot about, was a legend. He was running the writer's room.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to sit in there for hours while they were punching up that week's show.
Wow.
And Fred Wolf, who I was friends with, you're probably familiar with, was on the show a long time. He would say, "Hey, Hugh, what do you think? What do you think of this sketch? You got any jokes?" So I was, trying to be very humble, and I didn't want to step on anyone's toes. So I may have a couple times suggested something, but I pretty much just sat and observed.
Right.
Oh.
And that's wild. I mean, did you know Downey and Fred Wolf before that, or did you meet them for the first time then?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I knew Fred Wolf before I knew Spade.
Okay.
Fred and I used to do stand-up together on the road in California and at local clubs. Downey, I just never met in my life. But I'll tell you guys something hilarious. Downey had this thing in the office. It was a Magic Johnson Nerf basketball set, where if you threw the Nerf basketball into the net, then a recording of Magic's voice would go off. And so the voice said three different things that they took from Magic's interviews. One was, "It's the ultimate." I remember that was one. And another was like, "Yes." It was just his voice. So Downey would, for hours, do a bit where he would basically go, "Magic, are you HIV positive?" "Yes." "Magic, what's it like to have unprotected sex?" "It's the ultimate." And he would just harp on this, saying the most dark, inappropriate things about Magic, using the Magic Johnson Nerf basketball recordings.
Wow.
It was pretty much, I remember going, yeah, I belong here. This is totally my sense of humor. I need to be on the show.
These are my people.
Yes, I really did think that.
So when you kind of like get into the show like that, where you're starting off just writing jokes for Spade on the side, did you have to submit a packet for that, or did you just?
No, it was all informal. It was
okay.
I'm friends with Spade. Spade has a right, like any cast member does, to reach out to comedy friends for help. Obviously, it was done on the hush. Like everyone. It's so competitive. You're fighting for your job. It's not like he's broadcasting to everyone. Yeah, Hugh Fink, my buddy in LA, wrote that joke or is helping me. But it was certainly acceptable.
Right. But he could, like, I don't know, 6 weeks in say like, hey, could Hugh come in when he's in town because he's written some stuff for me.
Yeah, and it was done more. My guess is at the time, even if I weren't a professional comedy guy, if Spade just wanted a friend of his to come up and hang, as long as the person didn't cause a problem, the show was fairly casual about that stuff.
Right.
They were then. But yeah, the fact that I was a working, up and coming stand up would make it even more understandable. So no one questioned that I was there. And I remember, because Sandler and I were friendly, we hung out a bit that night, and it was a great experience.
And it was also like the pre 9/11 security, when you could still like just walk into a building in New York City and go up, and you wouldn't have to deal with security guards necessarily.
That's all true. That's right. In fact, I wrote on the show when 9/11 happened. Top of the show, you mentioned my years.
Right.
So I saw the change just during my tenure.
Yeah,
how much tougher it became to get into the building and ride up the elevator.
And that was your last season on the show, right? You won an Emmy for that season.
That's right.
So, I mean, what's that like? Your 9/11 has happened. You come back September 29th, 2001, and they find anthrax in the building that week?
Yes. I don't remember it was that week, but they definitely found it while we were in pre-production. And it was interesting. Some people who I worked with were completely freaked out and immediately went home. I stayed at NBC. In other words, I didn't feel threatened. I was concerned. But I got to be part of this meeting. We met with the head of NBC News at the time, Andrew Lack. He gathered us all together and gave this speech basically telling us our safety was the utmost concern of the network and not to worry. And he understood that people were scared, but that we should all hang in there. But yeah, it was a very weird time.
That's nuts.
Wow, that's crazy. So I guess as you became an SNL writer, you we've heard the stories about the writing room and how, people are always kind of fighting to get their stuff on the air. John and I, we actually did an episode on the Saturday Night, that small little documentary film that like James Franco did. So I was wondering, like, did you have to sort of, do any of that where you had to like sort of fight for your airtime, or was it because you sort of had an in with Spade and like you sort of earlier you kind of got like acclimated already into the room it was like a little bit easier for you to get your ideas on
Well, the only thing that made it easier for me my first season was I produced and created David's segment Spade in America.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was pretty cool. We had our own little segment on the show.
Right.
So it wasn't competing with, 10 other writers who had material for that slot. However, there were a couple times where our segment got cut from the live show. It didn't air. So that was frustrating, which proves to you how there's no guarantee on Saturday Night Live.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like Lorne Michaels, and they can decide that night what gets on the air, even if you've rehearsed it and filmed it or anything.
And how much excess material would they generate in your day on the show? Like, I know the dress rehearsals are longer than the live show. Would you have like a half hour more of material, more than that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say more than that. I would say, and by the way, based on my experience guest writing at the show 2 years ago, nothing's changed in that regard. I would say it could be 15 minutes of extra material, at the most a half hour, but somewhere in between that.
Right, and it's interesting because like nowadays they put up the cut for time sketches on YouTube. A lot of times, we see it. We see like one or two every week, and those are always interesting to check out. And we try to cover those on the podcast when we're running down a new show, and we usually say like, "Oh yeah, I wish this was in the show," or "Yeah, I see why they cut this." And it's interesting to see. It gives you a little insight as to how they pick the material.
It definitely does, and that process of picking the material, there's a lot of factors, right? It could be that the guest host doesn't like that sketch. So they go through the motions all week of rehearsing it and doing it. When push comes to shove, they basically say, yeah, I don't really want this sketch to be on the air. So that could be why it's cut. The other reason stuff gets cut is if they're trying to showcase certain cast members for that episode. And okay, this actor's already in 3 other sketches, so we're going to cut this one to allow another cast member to, have a bigger part.
Right.
So there's different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, there's politics in it, and I mean, when you started on the show, it was also just such an interesting time on the show because there had been this massive turnover in the cast, and I'm assuming behind the scenes too. Like you started at the same time as Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry and Daryl Hammond and that whole cast. And there were just maybe like 3 holdovers, I think. There was Spade, Tim Meadows, and someone else. Molly Shannon. There you go.
Right. That's right.
So what was that like? That was the last time that I can remember where they were seriously talking about possibly canceling the show.
You're 100% right. And we were all, of course, a lot of us had never worked in TV before, so we were just excited and didn't worry about sort of all the rumors, but they were floating around for sure. And even NBC, which normally I think stayed away from the show because they weren't welcome in terms of the network executives, that first season, we had Lauren Littlefield flew in a few times.
Wow.
And was there at the show. It was just this weird feeling because that's not normally how SNL operates.
Yeah, that's nuts, right?
That's so there was that sort of feeling of foreboding throughout, but I guess you just have to sort of keep your head down and just do the best work you can. And also, speaking of which, we should probably, I was thinking maybe we should like get into some of the sketches you wrote. One that really sort of took a life of its own that sort of has like a cult following now. On the Lucy Lawless episode, the Stevie Nicks Fajita Roundup. Like, I looked at that sketch and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. This was, wow. How do you come up with the idea for this? Like, it was, I don't know. I still dig it, but I was like, how do you even come up with this idea?
Thank you. Well, here's how I came up with it. I always made a point to meet with the guest hosts on Tuesday nights because they'd make the rounds of the writers' offices. And at that point, if you chose, you could have a private meeting with them, sort of to either run your ideas by them or just kind of figure out what you want to do. So I had Lucy come to my office, and I asked her if she did any impressions. Because honestly, I was kind of struggling with, like, I don't know what to write for this woman. She's from New Zealand. She's on Xena Warrior Princess, a show I've never seen. I didn't really have a lot of ideas. And she said that I do a Stevie Nicks impression. I said, seriously? She goes, yeah, people tell me it's good. So I didn't even ask her to do it. I just trusted her. And I said, okay, cool. So she left my office, and I decided right then and there, I'm going to write a sketch where she's doing Stevie Nicks. I have no idea what the sketch is going to be. So it's now probably approaching midnight. I'm not kidding you. And and then I go, okay, I got to do something that's so out of the box. It's not a Fleetwood Mac concert. It's not Stevie Nicks singing at a traditional music venue. So that's when I start going, what if she's doing a promotion for something, but it's not even a high class promotion. It's something very low rent. So the whole thing just started coming together. And I knew her reputation. She was a bit of a hippie chick. And there were rumors about her cocaine use and all this stuff. So I used all those elements to put her in Sedona, Arizona, running a super cheap Mexican restaurant.
And this sketch, there's such a cult following around this sketch. They actually did an oral history on it about a year ago on the website The Ringer. And you were talking about how, like, because when you write a sketch, you are more or less producing it, right?
That's correct.
And so you were telling them, no, I want the food to look crappier. It's got to be a really low quality restaurant.
You're right, John. And looking back on it, you can see, I think that was a really smart, creative decision, right?
Yeah.
Because if the pictures of the food had just been normal, it wouldn't have particularly been funny. But the fact that I made the graphics department find crappy looking food got consistent laughs through the whole sketch.
Yeah, and the fact that it's just her singing, Rhiannon, but changing the lyrics to talk about burritos and quesadillas, like it's pretty, it's pretty hilarious. And
honestly, that was the most fun part of the sketch. In terms of writing, was taking classic Stevie Nicks songs and going, what's a way I can shoehorn in the most ridiculous words that pertain to Mexican food? They don't even have to. If they rhyme, the rhyme can be really bad. So I think there's 4 songs we used, right? But they just got more and more absurd, so that we ended with "Landslide," her classic ballad. Right. And I remember I literally just used the last lyric, "Landslide kept me down." I didn't even change it. I just thought it's funny to just have her singing about beans and rice and all this stuff, and she still goes, "And landslide kept me down."
Well, honestly, landslide does apply to Mexican food as well. I mean, if you're especially if you're not at a high quality place.
That's right.
I mean, the other thing I love
writing funny lyrics, because I'm a classical violinist and I'm pretty musical. So any chance I got to put music in a sketch, that was always among my favorite things.
Yeah, and I love it. Another thing I love about the sketch is that it's just her. There's no other cast members in it, which is pretty rare for an SNL sketch where it's just the host and no other cast members.
You might remember, Darren, there's a young Jimmy Fallon. He doesn't speak. He's the piano player.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Background of the Mexican restaurant, just sitting there at the keyboard.
Okay. I stand corrected.
It's fun to look back at a sketch years later, and then you realize, oh, there's that person who became super famous later on. I mean, it's like seeing Tina Fey before she was the head writer, or you see Paula Pell in audience questions now, and
totally.
Yeah, and I'm sure you popped up on there as well. You did a segment on Weekend Update, right?
I did my own piece on Update. It got big laughs. It was the Charlize Theron show. And the topic was perfect for your podcast. I came on the show to talk about how I was that season maybe the only Jewish writer, and that maybe that's why people said Saturday Night Live isn't funny. Jew on the writing staff.
Sure, yeah.
And I used that to segue organically into the nominee of the first vice presidential Jewish candidate, which was Joe Lieberman, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I happened to do a really good Lieberman impression. So I was able to do my impression of Lieberman on my update piece. And that was the year that Jimmy Fallon and Tina Fey co-hosted Update.
Oh, nice. That was a golden era of Update, as far as I'm concerned.
It was cool.
Those were. Now, did you have any? Is it tough for you to get on the show when you are just a writer to get a segment on Update? Was that
really, really hard? Because think about it, the show's already competitive, right? You've got Will Ferrell competing against Molly Shannon, competing against Norm Macdonald for sketches. Then you've got me, a writer, competing with them for a spot. And spots on Weekend Update are coveted.
Right.
You know, just like you see Cecily Strong and Bill Hader, like those are sought after spots.
Right.
So it was really, really hard. And there were a couple other funny update pieces I did that made it to dress rehearsal, but they got cut before the live show.
Oh, that's got to be frustrating.
It is really frustrating, and yet goes with the territory.
Exactly. Could you recycle any of that material into your stand-up act?
That's a great question. I will tell you one that I was proud of that kind of bombed, but the only people laughing were the SNL writers and cast. I did a bit, you guys, where I called myself like Hugh Fink, consumer affairs reporter. So he brought me out, and I was allegedly there to report on what you thought was going to be my review of a local children's hospital in Manhattan. But I basically spent the entire review bitching about how I was mistreated at the cafeteria at the hospital and how the food sucked and how the service sucked. And when I complained, they were rude to me. So it became almost like a restaurant review under the guise of talking about healthcare. So, It is a really funny concept, right?
Right.
But it's really dark because I think I started off by saying, on the 17th floor houses, the leukemia victims. I was just like setting it up, how serious the hospital was. But it kind of chilled the room because they did not like the fact that I was this sort of, arrogant guy bitching about how mistreated I was by the restaurant at the hospital.
Wow. That's humor can be a little edgy sometimes. So you gotta.
Yeah.
I say so, but I remember feeling so in control of my craft, which is a nice feeling where I'm out there in a live studio audience at 8H, and I'm, as a comedian and stuff, used to getting laughs, but I was not getting laughs. But I didn't at all back down. Like, I totally stuck to the character. And that's what made Steve Higgins and the other people on the show laugh uncontrollably, because they said it was great to just see me just commit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
actually, that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Actually, what? When you talk about that, what that kind of reminds me of is another sketch you wrote, the Larry King sketch with Norm Macdonald. Because because Norm is one of those guys whose sense of humor is like he's kind of running on a different frequency than most people. It's not a broad type of thing, and not everybody will get it, but the people that get it really get it. And like I really love that Larry King sketch you wrote for him, where it was like USA Today, where it's literally just him looking to the camera and delivering these one-liners, like these sort of non sequiturs, switching to another camera, looking into it, delivering another line. And like in between that, there were a few times where he would just like stare at the camera just a little too long and not say anything. And it was just like that nervous kind of energy was like throughout the audience, the way he was just like not saying anything. And that would just like even get a bigger laugh from everyone. Like, can you talk about that sketch a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes when people ask me what's my favorite sketch I've ever written for SNL, I say it's those Larry Kings.
Wow.
Because in the way you described it, I also have that sort of offbeat, unpredictable edge, which I think that sketch incorporated. And it was the mix of, some of the jokes were just plain weird, like almost as if Larry's senile. He goes, "Does anybody remember baseball cards?"
Right, that's the one. Yeah.
Nobody remembers, right?
Right.
So that's not a mean joke. It's just weird, right?
Yes.
But then 2 sentences later, I'd have him go, "Is it just me, or is anyone else sick and tired of Nelson Mandela?" And that would make people, kind of wince, because who the hell ever makes fun of Nelson Mandela?
Right.
And then I had sort of the jokes that he would do where they were about something really dark. So he'd say, "I have no tolerance for people who commit rape." So like, wow, Larry, thanks for going out on a limb and saying you're anti-rape.
That's a tough stand to take, man.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I think what you said is true, that the pauses in between each joke made it, to me, put it over the top as just being an unusual piece of comedy.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
There was that one time where he said that line that you just said, the baseball cards line, and he just stares right into the camera for like longer than he should. And like, he's not breaking. He's just like staring right into your eyes. And like, the audience is like, what's happening? Why isn't he going to the next camera? And then he just waits a little bit longer, and then he goes to the next camera. That's Norm right there.
That's Norm right there. No, and I feel like it was the perfect synchronicity of me as a writer knowing what works for Norm and knowing his sensibility. And by the way, I convinced him to do Larry King. He'd never done Larry King on the show.
Oh.
Really?
I'm pretty good at casting. I knew in my gut that he'd do a brilliant Larry King. I just knew it. And man, I think he was the best Larry King ever, by far.
Yeah, I mean, his cadence really lent itself to Larry King. And I mean, you don't really think of Norm Macdonald as an impressionist, but he had some killer impressions. He did Bob Dole, he did his Burt Reynolds,
right?
And his Larry King was great as well.
Yeah, Letterman too. Great Letterman.
Oh yeah, he did Letterman. You wrote that one, right?
Tom Giannis actually wrote the Letterman, but it breaks my heart. I did write one that killed at the table read. I mean, crushed.
Mm-hmm.
And then John Goodman was the guest host, and I had him playing. I'm trying to remember what he was doing on it, but somehow the sketch got killed for, like you said, political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was like, it probably would have been first or second on the show. It did that well, but something killed it, and that was so upsetting to me.
Oh.
I remember like some behind the scenes footage, and this was from when Gwyneth Paltrow was hosting, so I think it was from your era, and I can't remember if it was from the James Franco documentary or what, but they're trying to decide what the lineup is going to be for the show, and Gwyneth Paltrow just goes, "Well, what's the funniest?" And Lauren just immediately goes, "Oh, like that matters." Because, like, Lauren's thinking about like 6 different levels.
He really is. I mean, he's a mad genius, so it's hilarious that he said that.
Yeah. And I love that he said that, and then he said it on camera.
That's pretty great.
Yeah. And that's a killer line, too.
It is a killer line.
Now, who really surprised you as a host in either a good or a bad way during your era on the show? Because you're there for 7 seasons. You got about like 20 hosts a season. So that's like 140, 150 celebrities you got coming through there.
It is a lot. You're right. I would say I didn't know how multi-talented Kevin Spacey was until he hosted SNL.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because he did so many great impressions, and he was just pretty remarkable in that regard.
And not so much in other regards.
Right. Correct. I would say there were definitely people who disappointed. Let me think who was well.
If you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, you don't have to.
That's okay.
But,
I'll say this.
Okay.
Red Kinnear, who seemed like a funny enough guy, kind of just, there was nothing there as a host.
Yeah.
Just not much personality. Yeah.
Not a lot to grab onto, huh?
Right. So there were always surprises that way. The late Danny Aiello, I will say, he seemed funny at the table read, but once he went on camera and did the sketches, they kind of fell flat.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that happened a lot at the show, by the way, where on paper, the person reading it, they seem like they're going to be great, but then when you actually mount the sketch, they are not good. And it's
That's a bummer.
Impossible to predict, but it does happen.
Right. Is that just like a nervous thing, or
it can be? It can be a nervous thing, or it can be a thing where, television's weird. Sometimes people come off better on film than live television.
Sure.
And it's just an electricity that some people lack when they go on camera, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I hear you. So like some performers perform better. They perform better, in front of a camera where they can do, multiple takes and whatnot. And some can do it live right on the spot. Everybody's
That's
different.
Right. And, I think there's a lot of movie actors who are great in a scene in a movie, where they can rehearse it and not look at cue cards and all that stuff. But you put them in a TV studio and somehow it just doesn't work. And that's an intangible quality, but you see it a lot.
I wonder if that's why somebody like Alec Baldwin has thrived as a host, because he has done stage work, and Kevin Spacey's done stage work. So maybe they had more of the tools to really be successful as hosts.
It's possible, right? I mean, also was like Jennifer Aniston was always really good. I think I worked with her twice. She hosted, and she was good. She could do characters. She could kind of play herself, but she just had that quality where she popped on camera in a sketch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought there were rumors that she was actually going to be a cast member, like before she got Friends. Like, I remember hearing that.
Right. I think it was around the time that I got hired, around that time. I did hear that.
Nice.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I do remember reading that she did a audition to be a cast member. That's boggles the mind to think of that alternate universe where that happened.
Yeah, and also, Lisa Kudrow almost made it onto SNL too before Friends.
That's right.
Yeah,
crazy.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Now I understand, Hugh. You have the record of SNL writers. You've written more SNL monologues than any other writer. Was that by accident or by design? How did you get into that?
It was by accident, but it was just I gravitated toward monologues as a stand-up, and I had the ability to not just write for myself, but sort of adapt someone else's voice and persona. So it came naturally. And writing monologues is considered sort of a thankless task at the show because, the host is nervous about it, so there's a lot on the line for them, and it's not like you get great reward for writing a stellar monologue. And if you guys have noticed, I haven't really enjoyed the direction that monologues have gone the last several years on the show. It seems to me they're less just balls out funny and more about being charming and sort of just making the host feel good or making the audience feel good.
Right.
Whereas when I was there, I felt a tremendous pressure and challenge and satisfaction to make them really funny.
I watched a few of the monologues you wrote, and something that struck me was, they were definitely shorter. They were just punchier. They're like 2.5 minutes, and you're out. Like you did one for Robert Downey Jr., and it was right after he got out of prison. You said he was kind of a sport about that, right?
He was a great sport about it. No, he said, absolutely go for it. Tear me to shreds, make fun of the fact that I was in jail for drugs. And he was really cool about it.
Right, and there was also the Britney Spears monologue that you wrote for her as well.
That's right. And again, she was a kid. She was maybe 17 when I worked with her, but I give her credit that she wasn't above making fun of the rumors about her lip syncing and her boob job, and she just embraced it. And that's not true with. I give you an example. Like I wrote this monologue for Bill Pullman that was slated to be on the show until he changed his mind midweek and didn't like the attitude, which is I was basically making fun of the fact that everyone confuses him with Bill Paxton and Michael Douglas and Jeff Daniels.
Right.
And something changed where he got mad that he felt like, I'm above this. But of course he wasn't above it. He should have done it.
Right.
Because
absolutely.
what people thought, and it would have again made him more likable. Instead, we had no monologue. The morning of the show, Lorne was still trying to have me convince him to do it, and he wouldn't. So if you go back and look, he did this nothing monologue. It had like one half a joke in it, and it may have lasted 60 seconds, but it was just a ball of nothingness.
That's a shame, because like I remember like a similar sort of thing to the Bill Pullman, Bill Paxton thing when they did a game show sketch, and it was Dylan McDermott or Dermot Mulroney, and they had like, this was after your era, I believe, but they had three black men trying to tell the two of those guys apart, and they actually had the real Dermot Mulroney make a cameo. I think Jamie Foxx was the host that week. And he goes like, "Oh my God, I've been sleeping with another man's wife," because even he was confused.
That's great. And again, the fact that you remember it all these years later only makes you like Dermot Mulroney more.
Yeah.
For being a good sport. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Sometimes with these hosts, they might be okay with it, but their stupid publicists or entourage somehow take offense and convince them not to do stuff. And I think it's always bad advice.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. And also
for J-Lo when she hosted, where I had her playing Madonna.
Oh, nice.
And it killed at the table read, and she was on board, but she came to me like the next day and said, "I'm really sorry. I just can't do the sketch." I said, "Why?" She said, "Madonna and I we got into an argument about something, and we repaired it." She goes, "I frankly just don't want to piss her off again. I'm afraid that this will." So I was, of course, really disappointed. I did appreciate that J-Lo was honest about it.
Yeah.
Right. No, that makes sense. You don't want to have the Madonna hive come after you or whatever they're called.
Sure.
Madonna-holics.
I mean, Madonna's got like those ninja assassins. It's like a whole thing.
Yeah, you don't want that.
She's like John Gotti.
Right. They're like, the dancers are like killing you while they're voguing. It's just a very humiliating way to die.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wonder, like we mentioned the Britney Spears sketch, and the Britney Spears monologue, and it's so funny because she's talking about the rumors that she had a boob job, which were flying around at the time. And as she's talking about this, her breasts actually start moving underneath her dress, which I'm assuming was some sort of radio-controlled thing.
Correct. It was a guy had the job of standing off camera with a radio-controlled device that was attached to her bra, so that when he'd manipulate the button, it would move what looked like her real boobs moving.
Right.
So it was a hilarious visual, and it was challenging to get the device to work exactly right.
Yeah.
But, we started rehearsing it Thursday, so we had a couple days to get it right.
How do you pitch something like that to her? Are you nervous going up to her and saying like, "Hey, Britney, we want to have your breasts moving underneath your dress"?
I'm not. I mean, I was always pretty bold about that kind of stuff because I felt if I believe this is funny, then it's my job to be really confident about it and not apologize or pitch it half-assed.
Yeah.
So I would just, how people pitch movie ideas or premises. I would tell them to come to my office and, make them feel good. And then I would sort of pitch my ideas. And I never tried to pitch many ideas, maybe one or two. But I think that was my process with Brittany. And she didn't take offense at all. Or she didn't seem to.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I mean, there was another sketch of yours that you wrote, Caribbean Essence Bath Oil, which, what was this? I mean, it's Tracy Morgan with dreadlocks, and he's in bubble baths with various cast members, and I'm just like, how are you pitching that? You go up to like, hey, Sherry O'Terry, we're going to have you naked in a bathtub with Tracy Morgan this week.
Well, you make a good point because, truth be told, Sherry on the set was a little uncomfortable doing it.
Uh-huh.
And, she and me and the director had to let her know that, hey, we're not going to make you uncomfortable. And obviously it wasn't shot in front of an audience. That was shot as a pre-tape
right
in front of a green screen. But Tracy it was his first season on the show. So he was just this, wide-eyed kid who was trying to figure things out. He didn't seem to take offense, even though, his belly's being exposed and he's half naked on camera.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought you were going to mention the fact that, when I wrote that bit, believe it or not, I was really trying to say something cleverly about racial stereotypes. I would say it's not stereotypes, but maybe racial tension.
Mm-hmm.
And I deliberately came up with this premise of what would be more terrifying to these suburban white women than having this big black guy emerge from their bathtub and whisk them away. Like, that was the premise I started with.
Gotcha.
Wow.
I made it very lighthearted and silly. But at the root of what I was going for was that notion.
Wow. I did. Wow. That's interesting. I think that'd be more erotic than terrifying, but okay. Maybe that's just me.
Well, I guess it's the eye of the beholder, isn't it? Yeah. But obviously the way we shot it made it look erotic more so.
Right.
And there was nothing onerous or, that would make people in any regard, I don't think. But I'm just being honest with you, that was my original premise.
I mean, it's Tracy Morgan and dreadlocks, so how could it not be erotic?
Yeah.
That's right.
Hot.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's right. And then the fact that I tried to play with like the bisexual nature that by the end it's Will Ferrell and Adam
yes.
Gasteyer being whisked away.
Yes.
So it's no longer just women, but now it's a guy. And Will, the look on his face is sheer delight. He's enjoying the fact that this huge Rastafarian is carrying him away.
Who wouldn't?
And that reminds me of another sketch you did. Speaking of half-naked cast members, you did Mr. Peepers.
I sure did.
With Chris Kattan.
Yes. So Chris had the Mr. Peepers character developed before he came to Saturday Night Live when he was a member of the Groundlings sketch group.
Yes.
But obviously he had no idea how it was going to work on TV. So he showed me a tape of himself doing it live at the Groundlings. And the very first one I wrote, was more sort of giving it context, which was, I imagined an anthropology professor having a major discovery and then bringing Mr. Peepers out to his college students and then having all hell break loose when Peepers is spitting the apple and ends up humping him. So it's not that I wrote it ever thinking it would be more than once, but it did go over huge. So we ended up doing like 4 or 5.
That's, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's one of those sketches that you look at and you're just like, where does that come from? How do you discover that you can eat an apple like that? Or
right. Well, so that I give Tan all the credit for. Because that was a skill that he came up with before Saturday Night Live. But obviously, you still need someone to create a template for how's this going to work as a sketch.
Right.
and I don't know how many of them you guys have seen, but my favorite one, just because it's so odd, was I did a parody of the movie Elephant Man, where instead of John Merrick being, the tragic figure, it's Mr. Peepers, who's living in 19th century England, and I had Kelsey Grammer as his benefactor. So,
I think I remember this. Yeah.
That one.
Oh, wow.
It had the line in it where Kelsey Grammer is defending Mr. Peepers to a mob, and he goes, "He is not an animal." And then he pauses and goes, "Well, actually, he is an animal, but you got to give him a break."
Sure.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it seems like your time there at SNL was pretty amazing. Like, you got to work with amazing people. I mean, I'm sure you must have like a story or two about some cast members or guest hosts, or just something that happened sort of behind the scenes that maybe
well, one
us folks would know that.
On the subject of Peepers is Charlize Theron. I did a parody of a softcore sex movie on Showtime. I think there was a real show called Bedtime Stories at the time on Showtime.
Okay.
They were like these erotic sexual movies geared to women. So I did one where it was all in soft porn-esque lighting, and the joke was that she is blindfolded as part of an erotic sexual ritual, and her lover brings in Mr. Peepers to satisfy her.
Oh boy!
So she doesn't know that the guy who's going at it with her is a half monkey. But there's a thing at the end of the sketch that I put in the script where she's being violently, she's basically humping Mr. Peepers. So it's incredibly explicit. Well, the NBC censors saw the rehearsal and they came to me and said, no, you got to tone that down. It's way over the top. It looks too sexual. It looks like they're having sex. So I went to Charlize Theron and told her the note, and she goes, fuck it. I'm not changing it. I'm going to totally go for it on the air. And she did.
I love that. I mean, because, they can't stop you. I mean, I'm assuming most of the time you're not on a delay or anything. So
Exactly. They gave the note. There was nothing they could do. And if you watch it, like, she was so into it. She was such a good sport. So I always appreciated her commitment. She thought it was hilarious.
That's awesome. She seems like a really cool person. Whenever I've seen interviews with her, she seems like a good sport.
Yeah, she was. I mean, I have no idea what she'd be like now hosting Saturday Night Live, but that was earlier in her career, and she had more to prove, and she was really good.
Oh, fantastic.
That is very cool. Now, you came back to the show recently. You guest wrote on a couple episodes in 2019 where Sandra Oh was hosting, and then the next week it was Kit Harington from Game of Thrones. What was that experience like? Why did you come back to the show?
Steve Higgins and I have kept in touch, and he was kind enough to invite me as a guest writer, and said, it'll be cool. You just help these young writers. You know the show well. It's always good to get a new voice. And of course, I'm aware that being put in that situation, you don't want to come in as the know-it-all to make anyone feel uncomfortable. And also, it's so competitive that it freaks other writers out. It's one more writer they have to compete with to get stuff on the air.
Right.
So for those 2 weeks, I didn't end up writing anything that did get on the air myself, but I participated in the rewrites, and it was really fun to just be back after all those years with a completely new cast. And it was comforting. Some of the staff of the show's still there. Tom Broker, who's the famous guy who does all the costumes and hair and makeup overseas. And who else? Well, Ken Among, who sort of does all the non-creative stuff producing behind the scenes, has been there for years. And the production design team is the same. The ones who do the set design.
Right.
They've been there for 20-some years.
I mean, they're like one of the famous people that the real SNL cult knows is Akira, who's been with the show from the beginning and is probably he pops up as Mr. Sulu in every Star Trek sketch they do.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Akira was very happy to see me. I think. Oh, he said, "Oh God, you make me feel old." But no, he looked good, and so it was really fun to go back. And Lauren was still sharp. I would say the show it's a table read. I was struck by how much slicker everything is at the table reads.
Mm-hmm.
Now they've got like full on music soundtracks accompanying the stuff.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was like much more formal a presentation than when I was there.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Had the show changed in many other ways?
The other way, you guys, huge change is the rise of digital shorts.
Yes.
Because there's 3 directors now on the show who every week are directing at least one short. So, of course, that is a reminder of how the less of the show is live than it used to be, right?
Right.
But when I was there was one director, and now there's 3.
Wow.
I think we can probably credit Lonely Island for that shift.
I would credit Lonely Island. I would say that what was the cupcake?
Oh, Lazy Sunday.
Yeah, Lazy Sunday.
Lazy Sunday, exactly.
Yeah.
Lazy Sundays, and I'm on a boat, which I think maybe was the same season or right after then.
Probably.
Like those were the Lonely Island stuff that really launched that aspect of SNL being popular.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So as far as the new cast goes, do you keep up with SNL still? Are there any like writers or performers that you really enjoy? Is there anybody who you wish you could have written for?
I think Streeter Seidel, the writer,
He's a favorite of ours.
He's great. And when I was at the show those 2 weeks, seeing the stuff that he came up with, I was impressed with. Some of it reminded me of the type of things I'd want to write if I were there full time. Liked him.
Yeah.
And cast-wise, I think that Cecily Strong is super talented.
Yep.
And in some ways underused. And I realize maybe she's done. I don't know if she's coming back. But just at the table read, I was very impressed with her.
I mean, right. She is absolutely one of our favorites. Streeter is one of our favorite writers right now. I think and they haven't done this too much. He has a recurring sketch that he does with Mikey Day, and it seems they do it whenever they have a British person hosting the War in Words, where he's the soldier writing home.
Those are funny.
Those are great. I love
really good.
And they haven't driven it into the ground. They've done it like just the right amount of times. So I'm always happy to see it pop up again, you know?
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think the other one they wrote when I was there, the Sandra Oh week, was, remember the woman named Tishy, who would just appear, was it like someone's looking in a mirror?
Oh, yeah, in their future self, yeah.
What was it?
They were looking in the mirror at their future self, and then they saw that their future wife was Sandra Oh with like a visor, and like she was kind of a weird person.
She was like a weird, sort of a obnoxious, slutty, almost like she seemed like a criminal mind. But I know Streeter and Mikey wrote that. That was really good.
Yeah. I think they're doing some really strong stuff. I mean, Streeter is one of my favorites, definitely. We sing the praises of Cecily Strong in this podcast practically every week. If she leaves, we are going to be heartbroken.
I'm with you. If anything, I think she's underused, you know?
Yeah.
Because she doesn't just do one thing. She's a good singer.
Yeah.
And she does dialects great.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the week I was there, I wrote a sketch that did so-so at the table read, but her part crushed. And afterwards, I'm like, God damn it, I should have written the whole sketch just about her when it got on the air. And it was basically, I wrote a House as a Parliament sketch recurring back in the day that people liked a lot. Mm-hmm. So it was the C-SPAN's coverage of the British government.
Okay.
So just the insanity of the House of Parliament because they shout each other down and stuff. So I tried to bring that back with Kit Harington, but I had Cecily play a British member of Parliament who is obsessed with the British actor Tom Hardy. He just had an unhealthy sexual crush on Tom Hardy.
Well, who doesn't?
Exactly. So every time she would stand up, she'd like, Mr. Prime Minister, is it not true that we are considering declaring a special day honoring the magnificent, handsome Tom Hardy? And then other Parliament members would shout her down, and they go, you've been told more than once, stop bringing up Tom Hardy. Then I'd have her stand up again and go, on the subject of the, British tax raise going on, how is this affecting Tom Hardy? Anyway, and man, people loved her version of it.
That's great.
And I was like, gosh, I really just should have kept the whole sketch about her.
Well, since the show has to go up in slightly less than a week, how much time do you have to rework or rewrite a sketch between like the read through and air on Saturday?
Well, as you know, so the table read happens and then they pick X amount of sketches that they're going to go forward with, right? Most things don't get picked. But if your sketch gets picked, you do have plenty of time to rewrite it. The fact is, most things don't change that much. Meaning, the premise is going to stay the same. The setting is pretty much going to stay the same because they have to build the set and get any costumes and stuff. What can change is dialogue can change. So you can make for crisper jokes. You'll make some cuts because the sketches tend to be a little long.
Right.
But I'd say they don't change. It's not like a page one rewrite generally. It's more just slight changes.
I see. Okay. And I imagine, because the show has to be pretty rigidly timed, would they get very specific? Like, I need 30 seconds out of this sketch?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And since Darren wanted to know a behind-the-scenes story, here's one you'll love. I wrote a sketch, you guys, for Danny DeVito and Tracy Morgan that was on the show. We did it dress rehearsal. It got picked. Now it's the live show, right? And it's the show has been put fairly late into the show. Like maybe it'll be the second or third to last sketch of the night. This rarely happens, but I hear over the PA in the internal studio, Hugh Fink to the control room, Hugh Fink to the control room. So I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? I go to the control room. Lorne Michaels goes, Hugh, I need you to cut the sketch in half. Now keep in mind, it's like 4 minutes away from the sketch airing live.
Oh my God.
I'm not kidding. And I was incredulous. And I go, Lorne, we're on next, like after the commercial break. He goes, figure it out.
Wow.
So this was insane. I had to make a massive trim in the sketch that honestly made the sketch kind of make no sense. But it was the only thing I could do.
What do? Do you just go up to Wally, the cue card guy, and just grab every other card?
That's exactly what I did.
Oh my God.
So then I gathered the actors together. I ran down to the set on 8/8 at the floor and go, you guys, sorry about this. The sketch is cut in half. They're like, what? I go, I know, it's insane. Just look at the cards. That's all I can tell you.
Wow.
So they did. And then I'm not kidding you. Some people, my friends are like, go, Hugh, that was your sketch, right? I go, yeah. They go, that was kind of weird. Like, what happened?
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, no, that occurred.
And that was just because something earlier in the show ran over, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yep. Something went over. So, yes, to answer your question, the show is timed, but sometimes Lorne himself gets into a quagmire where they're like, Lorne, you either are going to have to cut this whole sketch or, but we're overtime. and that's when he has to decide at the last minute what he wants to do.
Right.
So I was glad that he didn't cut my sketch totally, but it made for some really messy comedy.
And I understand that was like part of the reason that Lauren was so pissed at Elvis Costello back in the day when he just like switched songs on impulse because he was screwing up the timing of the show.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
And secondly, it is Lauren's show, so I don't think he respects someone who ignores his note.
Right.
And just does content without their approval. My first season, you guys, I added it. When you ask about rewrites, I changed a joke between dress and air, but I didn't run the joke by Lauren.
Oh.
And the joke went on the air, and he didn't like the joke, and he was not happy.
Ah.
And he basically called me out on it.
Dum.
So what does he do? Does he just like dress you down?
Yeah, he dressed me down. No, I'll never forget. He goes, Hugh, this isn't the fucking Chuckle Hut in Detroit. This is a comedy show.
Wow.
Yeah, he always knows how to get you feeling the worst. So he's like, okay, Hugh's a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
I'll remind him of his horrible gigs on the road.
Wow.
And is there a more demeaning name for a comedy club than Chuckle Hut?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there is.
Yeah.
But Will Ferrell and I used to laugh because he said that Lauren would do the same thing to him. He'd go like, maybe when you're doing this at the Groundlings, it gets big laughs, but this is Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
And
the thing,
that power of reminding you of your roots.
Right.
Wow. And the thing is, I would kill to play at the Chuckle Hut in Detroit.
Sure.
I know you would. In fact, after this interview, I've been so impressed, Darren, I was going to call them up and see if you could co-headline.
I'll send a tape.
Yeah, I think Skippy, Mark Price from Family Ties is working, so maybe I can get you a gig with him.
Fantastic. I'm in.
Skippy has actually shown up on my suggested Facebook friends. Yeah. Yeah. Because of like comedy friends we have in common, I think. Actually, since you worked on or created a showbiz show with David Spade, I have a weird connection to that show. I think it was my MySpace profile picture actually ended up on that show once.
Really?
They were doing a story about MySpace, and I think they just grabbed the the top 8 friends of one of the writers on the show, and I can't remember which writer it was at this point, but somehow I ended up in the mix on there, and
that's hilarious.
And I remember I got like 1 or 2 people messaged me about it. They were like, "Hey, your picture was on the Showbiz show with David Spade," and it was just such a weird, random thing.
That's pretty random.
Yeah.
Wow.
So whenever I see the name of that show, I just kind of flash back on that.
Well, technically, you should put it on your resume. You've appeared on the show.
I know it's a credit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely a credit.
I've appeared on there. I actually, the 2 times I went to a taping of Late Night with Conan O'Brien, they happened to do Shout to the Audience. I ended up on camera both times.
Wow.
The second time I was very nervous because I'd actually lied at my day job to get out of work early. I told them I had a doctor's appointment, and then I ended up on national television that night.
I worked on Betty White's Off Their Rockers, that hidden camera show.
Mm-hmm.
And more times than not, we would, you do the prank on someone that's hidden camera, then you have to ask them to sign the release.
Right.
So this happened more than once where we caught people cheating on their husbands or wives.
Oh my God.
So they didn't know, and they're like, no, you absolutely cannot air this.
Oh boy.
So would they just like refuse to sign whatever consent form you had?
Yeah, because it's within their rights to refuse, and then it's a big waste. You can't use it.
Yeah, and then you've just like wasted a whole afternoon or whatever.
Exactly.
Now you were also the head writer on the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. What was that experience like? How long were you with that show?
I was there 6 months. It was right before the Showbiz show launched because we had done the Showbiz show pilot and we're waiting for Comedy Central to greenlight it.
Okay.
Which took several months. So I quit Ferguson's show to go do my show, the Showbiz show. But it was a good experience. I inherited a writing staff from the Craig Kilborn show.
Oh, so this was early days.
This is early, yeah. And
okay.
so I was put in the unfortunate position of being told by CBS that I had to decide whether to fire those writers each time their contract came up.
Wow.
Yeah, because I hadn't hired any of them. But I did have to fire some of them because, unfortunately, Craig Ferguson's very different than Craig Kilborn.
Yeah.
So some of them were good writers for Kilborn, but they didn't have the skills to write for Ferguson.
Interesting.
So that was a challenging thing. And then I told the writers on Ferguson, look, guys, I got two words for you when you think of writing for Craig Ferguson. Benny Hill. This guy loves putting on wigs and dresses and doing accents and just being silly.
Right.
Which is Benny Hill. I said, he's not Conan O'Brien. He's not some hipster. He hates that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the writers really had to adjust their precious comedy concepts because, to me, he was the anti-Conan. He didn't want to do stuff that was sort of conceptual or thoughtful. He was not into that at all.
That's got to be such a weird situation. I mean, you've got a staff of writers. They're writing for a host who's other than the host they signed up for, and you're running a writer's room of people you didn't put together. You didn't hire them.
That's right.
Wow.
Challenging, right?
That's a very unusual challenge.
It was.
That's crazy.
I learned so much from Saturday Night Live that I feel like I can handle any writer's room in any situation.
Mm-hmm.
But walking into that, I knew that it was challenging, and I was apologetic to the writers I had to let go. And I said, look, this sucks, and as you know, I didn't hire you, so this is just a strange position.
Wow. And actually, maybe we should go back to that a little bit. Like, so when did you know it was time to leave SNL? So you've been there for a number of years. Did you just, it just felt like it was time?
I felt that the new cast members, some of them were not as fun maybe to write for. And I was just feeling that my best work there was behind me. Because I've been there 7 years.
That's a long time. Yeah.
What's that?
That's a long time.
It's a long time. And so I also was so empowered as a writer there, learning, how to produce your own sketches and work with all aspects of television production, the set design, the music, and the lighting, that it really did inspire me to want to do my own thing. So I think it was the combination of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you get to control so much of your own material. You're almost training to become a director and a producer on top of developing your writing.
That explains why, like Adam McKay, my colleague at SNL, why he's become a director and a producer. So I think it's true.
Yeah, because you really get to shepherd your own material from beginning to end, and also it's just such a quick turnaround. You really get to see what works and what doesn't. It's something you thought up like Monday or Tuesday, and then it is on national television on Saturday night. It's a pretty heady thing,
It's a heady thing, and it's, as you said, it's very empowering. And because of the collapsed amount of time this all happens in, it's in a good way. It protects you creatively because there's not enough time for too many people to give you notes.
Right.
Where you're doing a sitcom, it's just the worst. They can spend weeks browbeating a script to death. And reading each draft and telling you got to change this. Well, there's no time for that at SNL. And to Lorne Michaels' credit, he doesn't want that process to exist. He wants the purity of what inspired you to write it in the first place and go to the table read. That he wants sort of that spontaneity to work on the air.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't want a comedy show of a bunch of people who are second guessing themselves.
You do not. That's always the worst.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let's see. One other thing I wanted to ask you about that I noticed on your credits, You written for Rob Lowe. He was both a host of SNL and you worked on the Comedy Central roast for Rob Lowe.
Yes, I became friendly with Rob when he hosted SNL the first time he hosted when he was on West Wing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember we did a monologue which I wrote where people asked him questions about the West Wing.
Right.
So this is the time when Clinton was at the height of the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Uh-huh.
And I was able to break SNL history by having this set on the air. I cast Jim Downey as the guy in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And he stood up and said, "Hey, Rob, I was wondering, which is the room in the White House where they blow the president?" Yeah, they let us say it.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
History was made.
So Rob and I hit it off totally. He's a really smart, funny guy. He liked my dark sense of humor. So I used him on the Showbiz Show. You guys would love this bit. Remember NBC's campaign, The More You Know?
Da, 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 da. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I did one called What You Should Know. So it's shot the exact same way, but the advice was Rob Lowe, and it was all extreme, sort of like Larry King.
Mm-hmm.
Just inappropriate and weird and not predictable.
Uh-huh.
But we shot like 30 of them, and Rob was incredible in them, and then we aired them on Showbiz Show like we would do one a show.
Oh, so he just does a bunch in an afternoon, and then you milk that for a dozen shows.
Exactly. So they were great. And then we stayed in touch and friendly. So when he decided to do the Comedy Central roast, I immediately talked to him and said, "Rob, please, 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 I got to work with you on it." He's like, "Of course." So I got to write his response to all the people on the dais.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's arguably, I don't think there's ever been a better person responding on one of those Comedy Central roasts. He crushed. And his jokes were so on point and really mean and funny. And he was great.
He is a really funny guy. He really is like too handsome to be as funny as he is.
Totally.
Yeah. It's just too much to settle on one person.
That's right. And he knows that about himself.
Yeah.
And I think he's in complete control of his craft. But what's impressive about him on the roast is he almost has his rhythm and timing and stuff is that of a stand-up comic.
Mm-hmm.
He delivers it so well. And, most actors, even ones who can do comedy, they can't do a monologue well.
Mm.
But he's able to. He's got impeccable timing.
Yeah.
No, he's good. He was great on Parks and Recreation. I think that's when a lot of people, or even if you want to go back to Wayne's World, I think that's when people maybe started to realize, like, oh, he's funny too. Wow.
That's right.
Who knew?
They loved him. And wasn't he in Austin Powers?
He was in the second Austin Powers. He played like the young number 2. And he has this killer Robert Wagner impression. I think he said on his podcast, because I think he used to date Robert Wagner's daughter or something like that. So he'd gotten to know his cadences. And he's just got a killer Robert Wagner in his back pocket.
That's hilarious. No, Rob can do impressions. He's got a very good ear.
Yeah. That's great.
Absolutely.
I mean, did you ever have something that you thought was just going to work like gangbusters on the show and then just bombed horribly for whatever reason? I'm sure you must have, right?
Yeah, my feeling, to be honest, is usually when I felt it was going to do great, it did do great. It was more things where I thought it was funny and hoped it would do great. Those are the ones that sometimes didn't.
Mm.
So I'm trying to think of an example. Well, there was a sketch that I wrote for Jim Brewer that I wasn't convinced was going to kill, and then it didn't kill, and it got cut, where he played a shoe salesman.
Okay.
And he was the inappropriate shoe salesman, so like a woman would come into the store and go, "Hi, could you tell me what's the difference between these two pairs?" He goes, well, these are more for like cocktail hours stuff, and These are for banging.
Yeah.
Excuse me? So his whole thing was just to be overtly sexual, and to every customer, that was pretty much his response, is that this pair does this, and this one, and then he'd say something crude sexually. But what happened is, the problem with a sketch like that is, if they don't buy into the premise right off the top, you're dead.
Yeah.
Because it's really a theme and variation of the same joke.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not buy into it. So it just died.
And then you're like, oh, we've still got 3 minutes of this.
Exactly. And it was so painful.
Yeah.
But that, I think because of my stand-up roots, I generally had a good sense of what works with an audience. So if I was fortunate enough to get a sketch that far, to be in dress rehearsal, then it would usually do okay. It wouldn't necessarily kill, but it would do all right.
Right.
But obviously, we all have our missteps, and I definitely had stuff cut. But I'd like to think that more of my stuff didn't get cut. I think mathematically that would be the truth.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's what you want. I mean, because it seems like with a show like SNL, it's just a numbers game, right?
It's a numbers game, right? Jack Handy was a guest writer my final season on the show, and he's beloved and he's brilliant. But I'd say like 3 out of 4 of his sketches would get cut. They were just, very conceptual, and a lot of the audience just didn't respond.
Yeah, that can happen. Sometimes you can have a sketch that's just a little too out there in concept, or just maybe a little too much for people to grasp what you're trying to say. And it happens. It's a bummer.
That's right.
Yeah. Well,
that's right.
Hugh, we could like talk to you forever, but I know like Darren has to go in a little bit. But something you're doing. I mean, beyond just sharing all this knowledge and all these stories on our podcast, you're doing a sketch writing workshop on June 7th and 8th. Why don't you tell us about that?
That's right. A lot of times I encounter and meet funny professionals like you who ask me questions about how to submit to Saturday Night Live and how to get a submission packet ready, and other questions about the craft of writing. So I've had enough requests that I decided, you know what? It'd be really cool to offer a 90-minute workshop on Zoom so that people all over the country can participate. So that's what I'm doing. And these are geared to, serious-minded comedy people who are looking to up their game writing for late night. So one of the 90-minute workshops is geared specifically to sketch writing for television, and the other is geared to late-night talk show writing. So that includes sketch, but it also includes writing monologues, writing desk pieces, writing pre-tapes. And I'll definitely allow a Q&A afterwards, so anyone who signs up, I'm happy to take your questions live and address them. So it's really cool, and I feel like, honestly, there's a lot of classes out there that have people teaching them who may not have the chops or the experience, but I thought here's a way that people can have an opportunity to work with me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you've listened this far into the podcast, I mean, you obviously know Hugh knows his stuff, and he's had experience in so many different aspects of comedy: stand-up, late night, sketch comedy. I mean, I'm sure this is a pretty amazing opportunity, and it's on Zoom, so anywhere you are in the country, you can do it.
That's right.
So
thank you very much. And you just go to HughFink.com, my name, and one click you can sign up. And I'm really looking forward to doing it. I think that because of the interest in it, I'll offer them, every several weeks. Hopefully I'll do it. But I think it's going to be great. And my technique is not just to talk like I've been doing with you guys, which is fun, but I'll pull clips from some of my work on Saturday Night Live, some other work that I admire, and show it on screen so we can sort of analyze it and deconstruct it. So I'll talk about, like, here specifically is something to learn from and why. So I like to think it's not informative but it's also super entertaining.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be great. I mean, anyone who's listening to this who wants to get into sketch comedy, yeah, sign up for this. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. Go for it. You don't even have to. Yeah, guys, sign up. You don't even have to put on pants.
Exactly.
Don't.
Yeah, I mean, just angle that camera right, and yeah, you're good.
And then if this goes as well as I hope, then I will start wanting to go out post-pandemic and do these live, so I can come to Montclair, New Jersey. You guys can host it.
That's right. Yeah, we would love to have you here in New Jersey. We'll get something going for you.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. I'm not opposed to that at all. No, it just the pandemic was a good reason to sort of come up with this format, since creatives are stuck at home and wanting to be able to accomplish stuff. I thought, okay, I can make this work on Zoom. So
cool. All right. Well, I mean, Hugh, is there anything else that you wanted to get to, or that we didn't get to talk about over the course of this?
Yeah. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah.
Like it's weird. They can find me. I'm just not very active, but on Facebook and Twitter. But I think, honestly, HughFink.com is the best destination to find me, because I'm going to be uploading some of my newest work on there and updates about my workshops. So that's the best place.
Okay, and that's HughFink.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. And you can always, by the way, any of your listeners who have any questions for me or want to reach out, I totally will respond directly. So you can reach out to me at HughFink.com and I'll respond. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks so much for doing this, Hugh. I mean, this is a pleasure. I love it whenever we get to do like a deep dive into comedy and, finding out how the sausage is made. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks.
You guys know your stuff. I really appreciate it. And it was a blast. So would love to come back on some time. And meanwhile, look forward to our paths crossing.
All right. Yeah, that sounds fun. I'm sure you've got even more stories from your comedy career that you haven't gotten to. So we'll.
Oh my gosh, yes. We were sticking with some of the first round of them this time, but there's plenty more.
Okay. All right. Well, that's something to look forward to. We'll have you back on as soon as we can. So
awesome.
I think that's going to be it. I mean, I think this was a really fun bonus episode. Darren, you got anything else to say?
No, I think we're good, my friend.
Okay, then I think we're going to wrap this up. Please join us next week when we will have something else. But until then, nerds out!
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.